Is Baker Mayfield on the cusp of becoming the best quarterback in Buccaneers history? That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you every Monday through Friday along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. We are jumping into the mailbag in this episode. We're going to talk about depth at a couple of positions in the NFL draft. We're going to talk about some additions the Buccaneers could still potentially make and a little bit of focus on the defensive side of the ball. But let's start things off with the question that inspired this mailbag episode, and it comes from Fausto. And he says, do you think Baker will have to win a Super Bowl with the Bucs to overtake Brady as our best free agent signing? So this is an interesting question because the Bucs have a lot of really great free agent signings in their history. And I took this one a step further because we're not just talking about free agent signings. We're talking about free agent signings at the exact same position back to back. And it's wild to think that Brady was only a Buc for 3 years and is already the best quarterback in team history. And I know that that's kind of up for debate, but to me, he came in, he made the playoffs all 3 seasons he was with Tampa. He won a Super Bowl and is third in yards, second in touchdowns, second in completion percentage, third in wins, second in game-winning drives, and he only played 50 games, and he did it all with the third fewest games played of any Buccaneer, ranking in the top 10 at the quarterback position. Now, for comparison, Baker is rapidly climbing that same leaderboard. He has 16 fewer games played than Tom Brady, but he's 9th in passing yards, 1st in completion percentage, 7th in touchdowns, 9th in game-winning drives, made the playoffs in both of his seasons, mind you, won the division in both of his seasons. He's 8th among all Buccaneers quarterbacks in wins, and he has the fewest games played of anyone in the top 10. So, does he need to win a Super Bowl in order to surpass Brady? I think so. And I realize that that's not entirely fair and that Baker could sign an extension after this coming season, and he could be the Bucs quarterback for another 5 years and break all of their franchise passing records. He's currently 10,100 yards and 52 touchdowns behind Winston for first in those two categories, but Winston has 3 years on him. So you're talking about less than 20 touchdown passes per season and less than 4,000 passing yards per season for Baker over the course of the next 3 years. He's only signed for 2, but just to kind of extrapolate that a little bit, he could end up going down statistically as the best quarterback to ever play in Tampa. However, that's not really a high bar, right? I mean, that's why Brady is wildly considered the best one amount of time played. Before Brady, who would most people have considered the best quarterback in team history? My guess is it probably would have been a 50-50 split between fans among Brad Johnson and Doug Williams. Well, who knows what Doug could have done had Culverhouse paid him. But to me, the tie goes to the Super Bowl ring, which would be Brad Johnson. You also have to factor in the culture that Brady brought with him and instilled in the guys that are still a heavy influence in the locker room right now. Mike, Chris, Levante, Vita, Antoine, Tristan, those guys that won a Super Bowl with Tom and learned how to win in the playoffs. Those are the guys that maintained that attitude and taught the next group of players what it means and what it takes to be a winner. That is something that Baker has benefited from since he joined the Bucs. Now, it's not the whole reason for the success of the team. Baker has been crucial to the success of the Buccaneers in his own right, but the ripple effect from Tom still looms really large, not only throughout the locker room, but throughout the entire building. So the way that I look at it is Baker can absolutely surpass Tom in all of these categories. But if he doesn't win a ring, I don't think he can pass Tom as the best quarterback or the best free agent signing in team history. The other thing to factor in is when they signed Tom, that also brought with him Rob Gronkowski, Antonio Brown, Leonard Fournette, these other guys that wanted to play with Tom for the opportunity to win a ring because they knew that was what he would bring with him. So to me, Baker has to walk away with at least one Lombardi. That's why they play the game, right? That's why they get paid millions of dollars. That's why they bust their butts, put their bodies on the line. It's to win a championship. Is there any franchise that you can look at across the league and say the best quarterback in team history didn't win a ring when the franchise has won championships in their past? The only one that I could come up with was Baltimore, because Lamar Jackson is a billion times better than Trent Dilfer. But other than that, what other franchise could you do that for? You take a look at the best quarterbacks in Steelers history. No one's talking about Cordell Stewart. They're talking about Terry Bradshaw. They're talking about Ben Roethlisberger. The Dallas Cowboys, they're talking about Troy Aikman and Roger Staubach, not Dak Prescott and Tony Romo. The Green Bay Packers, they're talking about Bart Starr, Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers. Those are the guys that won championships. The Kansas City Chiefs, it's Patrick Mahomes. So when you have these franchises that have won Super Bowls, you can't really point to a quarterback that didn't win a Super Bowl for them and say he's the best one to ever play for this franchise. The other reason to me is because of the way Tom won his. No true offseason. There were the COVID restrictions, all the hurdles that the Bucs had to overcome that season in order to do what they did makes it that much more impressive. Now, Tom definitely had the benefit of a better defense than what Baker has dealt with over the last 2 years. But when you talk about the best player in team history, the best free agent signing in team history, when it's at the most important position on the field, I think the number of championships that they've won is vital to the argument. At the risk of sounding slightly hypocritical, I think Baker is probably already a better quarterback than Brad Johnson in terms of this team's history. Just his overall play is more impressive. He has more yards, more touchdowns, fewer interceptions, better completion percentage, and he's done that in 15 fewer games than Brad Johnson played for this franchise. Now, Brad Johnson won a Super Bowl, sure, absolutely. But it was the defense and the run game that really carried that team in 2002. Johnson got hot in the playoffs, which was awesome. Keenan McCardell was going off. Joe Jurevicius was going off. Keyshawn Johnson, Ken Dilger, those guys were tearing it up. But the duo of Michael Pittman and Mike Allstott mixed with one of the best defenses in the history of the game is what got them a Super Bowl. So even though Johnson got hot in the playoffs, he wasn't doing what Baker and Tom did for this team throughout the duration of the year or throughout the duration of his time with the team. Brad Johnson wasn't carrying that team to wins. Those guys did and do. There might be some wiggle room to revisit the discussion if Baker makes it to a Super Bowl but doesn't win, but that would be situational. It's hard to say that the only quarterback in franchise history to get to the big game and lose is better than one that made it to the big game and won it in his first season with the team. But like I said, it would be situational. We would have to cross that bridge when or if we get to it. As it stands now, though, I would say that Brady has his spot in the Ring of Honor reserved, and I'd be surprised if the Bucs didn't retire his number. At the same time, Baker is well on his way to a Ring of Honor spot as well. You need a couple more of those 4,500, 40-plus touchdown seasons with fewer interceptions, but Baker is showing that he is one of the best free agent signings and one of the best quarterbacks that this franchise has seen in its now 50-year history. More mailbag questions coming up. That is next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more, experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives business flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. Posting a job is free and simple, and within a day, with multiple qualified candidates to choose from. Visit Upwork.com right now to post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com. Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today. Imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd, witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person. Getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Game Time comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Game Time Picks curation makes it easier to find better value for tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. I just checked the Game Time app, and there are amazing deals on some huge matchups coming up. In fact, I used Game Time to snag some tickets for a game I'll be going to in just a couple of weeks, and it might honestly be the best deal for a sporting event or a concert that I've ever gotten. Can't wait to show you guys the pictures. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft podcast with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find the Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. A couple of draft questions here in the mailbag, starting with Mike, who asked, what is the first position group we should be looking at in the first round of the draft, and who are the top 5 players at that position? Now, that's kind of a tough question just because the top 5 players at that position shouldn't necessarily be drafted over players at another position. As far as pick 19 is concerned, right now I'm leaning cornerback, and here's why. Linebacker and corner are both really deep in this draft, but I think if you want a locked and loaded, shut down guy that's a day one starter, you're taking one of those top players. Will Johnson, Benjamin Morrison, Jahdae Barron, Trey Amos. Those are your plug-and-play guys. The ones that are a little more of a project but have insane upside are guys like Siobhan Ravel, who's coming off of an ACL injury. Hasn't played corner for very long, but when he did, he was fantastic there at Eastern Carolina. And then Azariah Thomas, of course, out of Florida State. I've talked about him a couple of times on this show. I would be happy with any of those players, and for different reasons. That said, I'm not taking Amos or Revel or Thomas over Jahad Campbell or Jalen Walker at the linebacker position, or over James Pierce, Mike Green, or Donovan Ezeraku at the edge spot. This is why the Bucs are setting themselves up to do whatever they want in the first round and not be pigeonholed into taking one specific position. The other reason that I would lean more towards one of those elite corners over the off-ball linebackers is because I think linebacker is the position that's a little bit deeper. I feel like the talent drop-off once you get into day 2 isn't as steep as it is at corner, and you won't wind up with guys that are more of a project like you will with some of these corners. So Jeffrey Bassa is a name that I've said on the show a ton, the linebacker out of Oregon. And I've mentioned him a lot because he's a plug and play starter that might be sitting there for you in the third round. Jack Kaiser is a guy that'll be there probably late third, early fourth round. He would take significant defensive snaps as a rookie. Demetrius Knight, Carson Schlesinger, Chris Paul Jr. Those are all day one starters at linebacker with super high ceilings, and they don't need quite the developmental work that those corners will that you would be taking on day two. Along the same lines, Trucker Brian wrote in and asked, it's no secret that we need another top tier outside linebacker and inside linebacker, which has the deepest class of talent, which could determine where we go at 19. Also, how's the ACL rehab for young Gretzky? What year can the Lightning draft him? Real quick, ACL recovery is going really well. He's about 60 to 65% of strength in that right knee now. He won't get cleared to return to the ice until he's testing at about 90% strength. So he'll be allowed to start skating in May. No hockey activity until that ACL is up to about 90% strength. As far as the Lightning drafting him, I guess technically they could draft him in 2027, but that's not happening. I just want him to be able to go to college and get a good job, and maybe if he's lucky, play some hockey there. No, I'm not lying to myself that he's going to end up in the NHL, but as long as he's still having fun, enjoying himself, and has the outside chance to get to play at college, even if it's just on a club team, I'd love for him to continue to fulfill that passion of his. But back to your more pressing question. Thank you also for checking on him. I do greatly appreciate it. I think inside linebacker is the overall deeper and more talented class. Now, I just talked about a lot of the names there at that position, and those guys on day two, even the start of day three, are going to be bigger impact guys right from the jump than some of those later edge rushers. And, that's kind of why I answered the last question by saying I would go more for one of the elite corners at 19 than I would one of the off-ball linebackers, just because I feel you can get a starter on day two. Now, if you're looking for impact in the second or third round at edge rusher, that's when you're looking at Nick Scourton, Landon Jackson, Jack Sawyer, JT. I even practiced this name for Tuimoloau out of Ohio State, JT Tuimoloau, Jared Ivey, but some of the other guys are going to be closer. Some of those guys that I just named, they're going to be closer to Chris Braswell than they are these higher rated guys like Pierce and Green. Maybe you get lucky and Michael Williams or Shamar Stewart slip, but with the combine that Stewart had, I don't think he's falling out of the first round. I sincerely doubt either of those guys are going to be available for the Bucs in the second without making some kind of move. But that brings me to my next point. This is why I'm gradually shifting to team trade down. Get some more picks. There's going to be a great starter for the Buccaneers at a position of need sitting there for you at 25, 26, 27, and you can snag an extra pick or two to get that developmental edge rusher or a wide receiver or a defensive lineman in a deep defensive line class. Even though you brought back Greg Gaines, Will Golston is still a free agent. You still need more depth, more rotation along the defensive line. You can snag a safety. You can get some of these other guys. I actually think it would be the best for the Bucs this season and beyond to drop back 6, 7, 8 spots and accumulate a couple of more slices of the draft pie, because all of the positions that they really need to address in this draft have super deep talent. So we know Jason Light loves to move around in the draft, but typically he's moving down instead of moving up. I need Jason to do a little bit more of that. You can pick up an extra third. Maybe you can pick up a fourth and a sixth. They don't have a sixth this year. So if you can add an additional day 2 pick, or even a day 2 and a late day 3 pick, now you're really in a great spot because you can fall back. And I promise you, whoever they take in the later part of the first round compared to 19 is still going to be a big impact player for the team this year. Defensive depth is on some of the minds of the insiders. That is next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Wrapping things up here on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, and Ricky is still in on free agency. What's going on, Ricky? Do you see us adding any depth to linebacker or cornerback before the draft, like CJ Mosley or Stephon Gilmore? Are we waiting for price tags to drop in order to make more additions? I don't think they're going to take that big of a swing. Honestly, I could still see them adding pieces on defense, a safety, another linebacker, but I don't think they're going to go out and get a Stephon Gilmore. Remember, Gilmore didn't sign last year until really late in the process, and he did not come down off of his asking price. He's willing to wait it out and get what he wants from a team that doesn't get the corner that they want in the draft, doesn't trade for a corner, things of that nature. So just because, things on the free agent front have slowed down a little bit, that doesn't mean that some of these guys will be willing to take less. It also wouldn't surprise me if the Bucs sign more of their own guys. I still think Mike Edwards is very much in the cards for them. Jordan Whitehead, I think he's gone. Anthony Walker announced on Instagram that he's wearing number 3. So I don't think the Bucs are interested in bringing Whitehead back on a cheaper deal. If they were, they probably would have tried to steer Walker away from that number 3. So Whitehead is gone. So you still need that safety depth. That is going to be vital. Sounds like Tyke Smith is going to be the starter back there. You can bring back Mike Edwards on a, team-friendly deal. He can be part of the rotation. He can be that ball hawk that Todd Bowles said that he wants on the defense. I think J.J. Russell is still a possibility for some depth at linebacker. Obviously, KJ Britt is gone, but J.J. Russell has played meaningful snaps over the last couple of seasons. I think he's still an option. And honestly, if the Bucs forego edge rusher in the draft, or at least, if they don't have the chance to draft one in the early rounds, in that first or second round, I could see Shaq Barrett returning on a 1-year deal that's team-friendly, very affordable, if he wants to continue to play this season, just to be another veteran presence in that room, help with the development. I would think he would have a bigger impact if he spent the whole offseason with the team rather than coming in off the street and trying to make an impact just for the postseason. So he would be a rotational guy to, help Hassan Reddick and Yaya Diaby and maybe Chris Braswell, but Anthony Nelson, of course, he would be part of the rotation, but he wouldn't be like Shaq Barrett from 2019, 2020, 2021, that kind of stretch. So as far as splashy names are concerned, I think the Bucs are done, but they're still going to make moves. They're going to try to upgrade the roster, overall, as far as the depth is concerned before the draft kicks off. And then finally, I had a few people write in with kind of the same question. It was worded differently among a lot of them, but the basic idea was the same. And that was whether or not Bryce Hall is simply a depth signing or if he is the Bucs' number 3 corner. Okay, so the short answer is yes to both. He is depth. He is the cornerback 3. The longer answer is that if the Bucs don't go with one of those top corners in the draft, you're looking at Jamel Dean playing this season. You guys know I was all in. I thought Jamel Dean was gone, done. Maybe he still is. As of right now, I think if you're not taking a corner in the first or second round, Jamel Dean is staying. So that would mean that Bryce Hall is the cornerback 3. That was supposed to be his role last year until he suffered the season-ending knee injury in week 1. So we never really saw that come to fruition. Now, the Bucs are going into the draft with the same plan that they had last year, but also with the plan and intent of upgrading the position. The plan last year, Bryce Hall is our cornerback 3. The plan this year, Bryce Hall is our cornerback 3, but we have an opportunity to upgrade. We saw so many injuries in the secondary last season that they have to know that the group of guys they go into 2025 with has to be much, much better. Whether that means drafting one in the first 2 days while still retaining Jamel Dean, that makes the position group better, makes the position group deeper. Whether that's drafting a guy early, then drafting another guy late, and then moving on from Dean, that could also potentially make the position group better and stronger. So I would say as of right now, Hall is the cornerback 3 because that was what his intended role always was. And to be clear, when I say cornerback 3, I'm not talking about slot corner. He's the cornerback 3 on the outside. So Zion McCollum, Jamel Dean, Bryce Hall. Those are your top 3 corners. Christian Izien, Tyke Smith, those guys have the nickel corner locked out. Like, we're good there. Whether it's Izien, whether it's Tyke, either one, you're solid. You're good. So when we're talking about the next man up, when Jamel Dean inevitably goes down for a series, a half, a couple of games, that's what I mean by the cornerback 3, and that is the role that Bryce Hall plays as of this moment. The unfortunate part is we never really got to see Hall in this defense, so it's hard to decipher whether or not this is actually a good move, if this is a reliable guy. Hopefully he's fully recovered. Hopefully Tyreek Funderburk takes a big step forward, but we're in hurry up and wait mode until the draft, which is exactly 5 weeks away now. So again, they could still sign a guy. It's not going to be Stephon Gilmore. If it is, I'll be really, really surprised. I don't think they're trading for a guy. They don't, they want to add more draft capital, not give some of it away. Unless you're trading a pick in 2026 to get a corner this year, then it's like, all right, cool, whatever. You can make up for that later on. So I think that's the intended role of Bryce Hall right now. Is he is the next man up if something happens to Jamel Dean or Zion McCollum. That is going to do it for this episode. I'm sure we will have plenty more to talk about tomorrow. I still have more mailbag questions to get to, so if you want to send one in, insiders, you know what to do. Shoot me a text, let me know. I got one right before I started recording this from, I believe it was Reggie. He had a really good question. If you're not an insider, become one. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. But if you're not, reach out to the Locked On Bucs Twitter account. Shoot me a direct message over there, and I'll get to as many of those mailbag questions as humanly possible. But please check out everything going on over on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at JYarcho_Bucs. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Like I said, join subtext.com/LockedOnBucs. Click the link in the show notes. And of course, make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube with those notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.